Alright, so obviously not a whole lot of creativity went into deciding this one. We're gonna... Obviously there was another option here. We're gonna do the original movie and the start of what is going to end up being the, to my understanding, end of the new franchise with War of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes coming out today, the day you're seeing this. And obviously another option could have been Tim Burton's movie, but I figured it'd probably better to do the original that started a franchise versus the new one that started a franchise, both of which successfully. Not so much Tim Burton's movie. Tim Burton's movie is kind of its own standalone thing, and probably for the better. So this, I think it better off we go into these two. It may or may not storm. Hopefully, if it does, it doesn't pick up at least too much. So, if you hear that, sorry. But we're going to start with the original, obviously, which came to us in 1968. And it was, obviously, it was originally a novel, and then it was adapted for the screen, co-adapted by Rod Serling, who obviously brought us The Twilight Zone. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. It kind of has that, it really very much has that feeling of how we're kind of, much like The Twilight Zone, kind of thrown into this altered world of sorts, and naturally there's a twist at the end. It's pretty much set up exactly like an episode of The Twilight Zone, it just happens to be almost 2 hours. Which doesn't feel like the case at all, because this is probably one of the most well-paced movies of all time. Before we get into the technical aspects, obviously this was almost a decade after Charlton Heston had won his Oscar for Ben-Hur, and he kind of got to be known to be that, you know, gruff hero type. And here, he does still kind of get to do that thing. He still kind of gets to talk through his teeth and stuff like that, but it's kind of in a different way than we had seen from him before, and that we saw after. Because it's not just your average, you know, adventure movie or anything like that. It's a movie with very much this mysterious aura throughout it, despite the fact that he still kind of has that familiar, heroic way about him. Because when we get into this world, for starters, like it's almost like we're in 2001 at the start, and you know we're just in the ship, and you know there's the cryosleep and all that other stuff, and it's fine. But then we are immediately jarred in multiple ways, starting with what happens to Stuart, this gorgeous woman that they have on board with them, who's part of the crew, happens to have a malfunction and has been dead for a year when they all wake up. And it immediately kind of sets this creepy tone right at the very start. And I don't know if the makeup from where she's decomposed is supposed to kind of foreshadow that it kind of somewhat resembles the ape makeup we're about to see. But if that's the case, I always found that interesting. But it is a very kind of jarring, unexpected start to this before they end up crash landing. And then that just kind of sets us up for this whole kind of creepy, unsettling vibe that happens for the first 20 minutes or so. Particularly, like when they see the scarecrows and imagery like that, or what they assume are scarecrows. And there's definitely something that's very... It's certainly a force that almost feels kind of like they may not be wanted here, or they may not be welcome here, or something like that, but they still kind of try to just go into it the best they can. They're all very charismatic about it, and that's the thing, is it's the entire first half hour is just them exploring this land before they find signs of life, and it doesn't feel like that at all. This first half hour just flies by, because I guess I'm not even really sure. That's the thing, is the pacing in this movie is so incredible to the point that the entire hour and 50 minutes feels like the length of an episode of TV. And we just go into these characters, even though we're going to kind of get cut off here, and we're only going to follow really one of them, and the other two are very ill-fated, very fast, despite the entire first half hour we spend with them. And then once we go into that, eventually the apes appear. And the interesting thing about it is you look back, and obviously nowadays everybody kind of strives for practical effects and stuff like that, and doing as little with computers as possible. So you go back and you see John Chambers' makeup, and you realize that before the movie was actually made, like when they were in pre-production, a lot of people were afraid about adapting this novel because it's like, if you have these people in these ape suits, it's probably going to look ridiculous. It's going to be like, I'm guessing they figured it was going to be something like the opening scene of 2001, where great as that scene is, a lot of people mentioned that it's clearly just people in ape costumes, and it can look a little ridiculous and certainly a little dated. But this makeup actually went much farther than they actually thought. For starters, just the scale of it, the fact that there are like, you know, not just the people in the foreground, but all of like the hundreds of extras, and they all kind of have this distinct look about them, and their characters. The performances certainly help too, kind of distinguish which one's which. The makeup does most of the work there, despite the fact that their personalities still do come through, and that actually, it's very interesting that that works, because the makeup obviously is a bit restricting. Like, you have the whole, their mouths don't move very much, but to kind of nitpick this this makeup is almost like, it's basically doing it a disservice to consider something like that a setback, because the actors do kind of pick up that slack, and it all kind of works together as a whole. To make these characters. I know it started off with, it originally started off with Edward G. Robinson. I think he was supposed to be Dr. Zaius, and he was the one that did the screen test with Charlton Heston, and I think it was like an illness or something. He was like in failing health at the time, so they ended up having to cast Maurice Evans instead, but still, it was kind of, when they had the screen test, it was like, holy shit, this might work. It might not look so ridiculous. And that's really, there's a lot of things to really point in the direction of how much that worked, but Chambers' makeup certainly has a lot to do with that. And then going on, there's also, obviously this movie went down in history for quite a few reasons. There was all that stuff, but there was also, well, before we go into that, there's also the rest of the technical aspects. I was talking about I guess it'd be editing, I'm not really sure what it is. It could be the writing too, but it's the way this movie moves is so, we get from one place to the other so quickly, because that entire first half hour is just them exploring the land, and then our second half hour, all the way leading up to the first time Heston speaks and the apes hear him, is exactly an hour into it. And that has always just amazed me. But then there's also everything, which obviously is astounding on a technical level, and that's just the stuff that was in post. That's not to mention the obviously the makeup got a special Oscar, I believe, but there was also nominations for costumes and score. The score in particular is a lot in setting that mood too, that kind of unsettling mood I was talking about. But then you also talk about, going back to what I was saying about when Heston speaks for the first time. And that's another thing this movie really pulls off that I feel like a lot of people kind of take out of context when we're talking about movie history. Because obviously this movie has one of the most... Actually, it's got a few very famous lines in it, but there's one in particular. And it's one of those examples where there are times where, like, I was talking about this with Sudden Impact, where the movie can just be very forgettable, but it has, like, one line. And because either the line is so good, or because it's delivered in such a badass way or whatever, it goes down in movie history, even if everything around it is completely unmemorable, which may even help it stand out. But this line in Planet of the Apes also kind of shows that context can be a really big deal with that too, because you think about Heston saying that line through the net and stuff like that, and it's like, yes, it's Charlton Heston saying a badass line, and it kind of shows this certain dominance given the situation that he's in. But you really, I feel like most people don't even realize they exclude the context when they talk about that line, and now it's the whole, there was a whole build-up all the way up through the movie to get to this line, because there is he conveniently gets shot in the throat, so he can't speak, and obviously in this future the humans do not speak because the apes are basically animal and man have switched places here, and man is just seen as this, they can't talk and they just sit in cages and mate, and that's all they can do. They are not smart enough to do anything else. And most of the apes by this point are the only person that's aware of what man is capable of is Dr. Zaius, and obviously he keeps that under wraps because he's a douchebag. That's the extent of it. So in this moment, it's not just a badass line, and it's not just delivered in a badass way and just to show, yeah, I can stand up to the apes. That whole reaction that the apes have to this, they're not aware at all that man can speak, and that's the first thing they hear him say, is that threatening line to them. And the context just makes it all, and I feel like that's really kind of an overshadowed thing when you look at just how much impact a quote has, where it's not always just, you know, the actor saying it or the badass delivery or whatever it is, or even the line itself. It's all about, it can be all about that build up to it, and that's one of those lines that really just, it's a lot bigger of a line than you remember if you're just going on the memory of him saying it without the context surrounding it. I always thought that was really important about that. And it's not just one of those lines that just went down in history just because. It was all about the build-up. Which is pretty much the whole movie's kind of about build-up, because we've got to get to that twist. The twist, obviously, that eventually made it onto the posters for the movie. And was, you know, referenced time and time again. I think even the poster for Escape from New York is kind of an homage to it also. And then eventually, I mean, there is some stuff here. I would go as far as to say the movie is almost perfect, but there are some things in here that it gets very on the nose when you talk about the comparison between what the apes have become and what humans have become. And it does kind of get on the nose, like the scene after that first ambush, the first time we see them, and there's the whole, you see, you know, people posing with animal trophies after they've gone hunting, and there's this flipping it on its head image of one of the apes taking a picture of the other apes standing around a pile of human corpses. And then there's the whole, like, just literally just a role reversal here when they talk about when Heston seems like he understands them and they just say, oh, that's just human see, human do. It does get pretty on the nose with stuff like that. But still, maybe it's just because we're so familiar with the story that nowadays it seems a bit, you know, beating us over the head just a little bit, but it still overall as a concept works wonders. And then this obviously also we went into a bunch of sequels too, and I marathoned them a few years back, and it was my first time kind of seeing all of them at once. The only other one that really stood out to me, I think, was Conquest, which is the one where we kind of transitioned, and it kind of showed us how they got to where we were. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes was kind of the Rise of the Planet of the Apes of its time, where that's where we got. Roddy McDowall was even playing an ape named Caesar by that point. And he's, obviously Roddy McDowall is great in this as Cornelius, as he would go on to be, but I think he shined even more later in the series when he was playing Caesar, and that scene at the end of Conquest is incredible. It's an incredible piece of acting under that makeup. And that's definitely something. Obviously you have another Oscar-winning actress in this with Kim Hunter, and the performances certainly do kind of break through that makeup a little bit, as I was talking about, and kind of make this, there's always kind of a middle ground. Like when you have a movie like this where acting is maybe not the first thing you jump to, it always kind of gives it that extra layer when you do have some great performances in movies like this, and it's not necessarily just a spectacle movie, or just this is what we can do with our effects now, or take a look at all of this and all of this just to get to our awesome twist. It all kind of adds up as this really fantastic product. And like I said, it just moves like a damn bullet. I can't express that enough. It is unbelievable how short this movie feels. It feels just like a very high-budget episode of The Twilight Zone, in a very, very good way. Like, usually you can kind of say if it feels like a TV show, that's a bad thing. But no, it's definitely does not take away from the full spectacle of it all. But like I said, it's not even just that. There's so much going into this and kind of so many layers going into it that all this stuff adds to it, and it's all just one big glorious product. And it's amazing that it managed to reach that status with all the doubt going into it, but it certainly earned its place there, and they just really made movie history with this one. They really did, and rightfully so. And it's one of those movies that just gets better every time I see it. I don't know about anybody else, but last year, Fathom did it for one of their screenings, and I really, really wish I had been able to do it, but sadly money was tight and I couldn't. That's a huge regret, but hopefully I get that opportunity again, and I will absolutely jump on it, because it's just on TV, it gets better every time I see it. So on a big screen, I can't imagine how much perfection it must be. So I don't know if some people have complaints that maybe it's dated or something. I don't really feel that. Just in like a couple of places there where I feel like it's a little heavy-handed, but other than that, I feel like it just absolutely holds up on all levels and is fantastic. And obviously it was the grounds to give us movies later on. I remember it felt like for a long time they were talking about rebooting Planet of the Apes, which kind of sounded like a disaster following Tim Burton's movie. I remember, even though I was like 10 when it came out, I remember being okay with Tim Burton's movie. I don't think I had seen this one yet. That might be why. But that was a little bit later in my life. But, so to kind of go off, I guess a lot of people thought, well, because Tim Burton's movie gets a lot of hate. It might be a little unwarranted, actually. But, basically everybody thought Tim Burton had set the bar so low. It's like, well, what could a reboot hurt? And so you go into Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and it's kind of like, for starters, you're not really sure, because while the original had this very mysterious aura about it, and this way of being like all build up and getting to these really big moments, and kind of just having a grounded way about it in comparison, it just kind of immediately, Rise of the Planet of the Apes has an instant blockbustery feel. Like, it feels like a movie in the middle of summer of 2011, from the second you lay eyes on it. And it's kind of, does that put you off immediately or not? Is it going to kind of have the same feel? Are they going to be able to kind of reinvigorate it while also doing their own thing in this modern world? And obviously also doing that with CGI, where well, there's the thing, obviously, because we'd already had Andy Serkis perfecting motion capture with playing Gollum and King Kong, and knowing that he was going to be Caesar in this, and it's kind of like, okay, we've got enough state-of-the-art effects here, because there's obviously this, as I was saying, there's this stigma now with transitioning from makeup to just all CGI, and it's like when you first hear that, your immediate thought is just, well, then it's probably going to be crap. They're not going to put near enough effort into it, not enough love into it, and it's going to be kind of lazy, and they're just going to, because you just imagine all those makeup artists working on this, and it's just like, well, we'll just do CGI now. But introducing the motion capture, I feel like kind of takes away that stigma a little bit, and it kind of makes you, it doesn't immediately put you off when they say it's going to be all CGI now, because that's not the case. That's just not the case, because we actually have Andy Serkis and other actors in here behind the CGI, and it's pretty much, it might as well be all them, they just happen to have animation over them, which by no means is to take away from the visual effects artists, but it helps so much. It helps so much, the motion capture. And because there is some other stuff in there that you may not necessarily be able to completely pull off, especially without the CGI. Like, one of the things that really stands out about the apes in this movie is watching their eyes. There's that particular scene when Caesar gets in trouble because he has to save John Lithgow, who's being attacked by the neighbor. And there's that moment that you couldn't really capture if an actor was buried in makeup, which is when, after all this is said and done and he's hugging Lithgow, we see in his eyes how he's able to go from, like, anger and being, you know, instinctively protective to being, like, sad and scared. And we see that transition, like, without a cut. And it's incredibly believable. And there's also stuff like, when Koba is having his procedure done, the way like his eyes are darting around as he's watching what exactly is being done to him, and it kind of just shows you what their minds are, what's like going on in their minds, and that's something that, as I said, you probably couldn't see if an actor was buried under makeup and trying to pull this off. You probably could pull it off, but it'd be extremely difficult and not near as kind of visible as it is in the movie itself. I will say, apparently this is a controversial opinion, but because I was talking about this all through, because this was like a visual effects frontrunner at the Oscars that year, as was Dawn. It ended up losing to Hugo, which was, it is admittedly weird, but I will say the love for the visual effects I think mainly has to come from the motion capture and what we see in their faces, because honestly, when you look at the movie and you see the apes, they don't really feel like they're there that often. To me, they look very, very animated, especially when there are humans in the scenes, like the scenes with, Franco and Lithgow and stuff, or in the labs even, when there's apes there, they look very, very animated. It almost looks like they're incomplete or something. But there are times where it does shine, like particularly the gorillas. The gorillas look like they're really there, especially that moment towards the end during the Golden Gate Bridge sequence when that gorilla's in the cop's face and like roaring. Right there, it does look like they're really there. But for the most part, like even when they're jumping to the helicopters and stuff like that, and when they're moving around a lot, they look very, very fake. I feel like the visual effects love strictly comes from when they're by themselves. It's okay when there's not another human in the shot, but what they're able to do with the faces, that's really where the genius lies. They seem to really clear that up in Dawn, though. In Dawn, for the most part, they look very, very real. But I feel like in like full body shots of the apes looked kind of shoddy in this one. But they were able to kind of, like I said, still being able to make them human enough in the face to make you kind of forget about that and give you these moments where they feel very real when they're just the main focus of them. And that also is really helpful in creating Caesar's character. Where obviously it's the work that Andy Serkis does, but also what they're able to animate over him, where this is also in the writing too, where we kind of get to watch Caesar become a character, because we start with him as just a small baby and we realize how cute he is, and then we realize where this character is going to end up. And you see him just as you would a human character. You see them from the start and you're like, how does this character, this sleeping baby ape, how does he get from here to what he is no doubt going to become? And we actually have a transition throughout the movie that feels incredibly believable because of how it's handled. And it's like, we know that's just Andy Serkis with green screen stuff. We know it's a lot of CGI, but somehow they've created this character that we're able to see and watch progress just as we would a human character. And how it's like, they're able to, like, eventually this ape is going to become a leader, even though he's just living happily in the house, almost like a pet. Obviously he has that question later, but then we get to that point when he becomes the leader of these apes, the very jaded, angry leader of these apes, and he literally wears the pants. He literally wears the pants and becomes the leader of these apes. And how it shows that he doesn't just go crazy. That's not how we get from point A to point B. There is an actual progression here of how he is when he's in the confines of Brian Cox's place, and how he doesn't just snap, he is made into what Caesar's going to ultimately become. And it's really, really strong character work for half CGI, half motion capture entirely, it all goes together, ape. And it's really crazy work how they were able to pull that off. And yes, obviously we do get to watch him made into this character mainly by our character Dodge Landon, played by Tom Felton. And yeah, this is when you realize that there are so many callbacks in this movie, especially if you're a fan of the original series, where it's like, obviously his name is Caesar, the same name of the ape that Roddy McDowall would play later in the series, and ultimately kind of be playing the same part, the catalyst for the takeover. But there is Caesar's mother is called Bright Eyes, which is what they called Charlton Heston when he was confined in the cages. There is the character of Dodge Landon. That's kind of the one where the thing is they put all these references in here, but the great thing about that is that they all make sense in the story. Like, if you were to... Like, usually when they do those callbacks, it's one of those things where there's, like, the callback and then the pause, and it's like somebody not in the know has to say, oh, that must be something I don't get. The callbacks in this movie are put in there so seamlessly that it's like somebody could watch this, and it could be their very first Planet of the Apes movie, and they just wouldn't notice, because it all just goes in there so easily. But Dodge Landon's the one that kind of stands out. That's kind of the one where you can tell... I don't think that's a real person's name. It's very clearly the two guys he got stranded with in the original movie were named Dodge and Landon, and it's kind of like... That's the one where it's kind of like, okay, but for the most part, giving Felton, the villain in this movie, gets two of Heston's famous lines, at least. I can remember off the top of my head. I think the Madhouse line in this one works really well, the way he's using it to... Because in the original movie, Heston's saying it out of fear when he realizes what's going on. Felton's using it to antagonize the apes, and it's in a different way. And then we get that moment when he uses the stinking paws line, the famous line I was talking about. And once again, it's all about context. And the funny thing is, they kind of turn it on its head a little bit, because the stinking paws line is the big payoff I was talking about in the original movie. There's build up and build up and build up to that line, and that line is the payoff. In Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that line is used as the lead-in to the big payoff, where it's like, Felton uses that line, and you're like, oh, that's the original line they said in the movie. And by the time that's kind of going through your head, this scene has a bigger payoff. Like, it really does not matter at all that Felton said that line, because that's not the purpose of the scene. Obviously, the most famous scene in this movie that is still raved and talked about today is the scene where Caesar speaks for the first time, which, once again, is the lead-in in a different way. In the big payoff in the original movie was, oh my god, a human spoke, and in Rise, it's only the lead-in, but it's the lead-in to, oh my god, an ape spoke. So I really liked it. It's kind of in the same context, but totally flipped on its head at the same time, too. And I thought that's really damn clever. And that's definitely the way, if you must make references to do it. It kind of reminds me of what Cameron did when he did Terminator and Terminator 2, where he basically made the same movie, only completely flipped it, even using the same lines. It feels like that, and that is a great way to be if you want to, you know, take references and kind of show how much you love the original material and how much respect you have for it, while creating something totally new that's still in the same vein, but very much updated and very much its own thing, too. So, as far as there being maybe too many callbacks, I would say they handle them well enough to where it's not an issue, like it would be in other movies where they just use it again and again to kind of use it as a reminder to say, we hope if we just use the same shit, you'll love us as much. No, this movie was going to take it and use that stuff from the original movie for its own gain, and not just to say, hey, remember this stuff. So I thought that was just the perfect approach to take all the stuff like that, and there's a lot of it in there, but I do like how seamlessly they put it in, which is the really important thing. And not just Caesar saying no, there are also, not that big, but there are also some really great scenes in this, like, and great standalone moments, like when Franco is taking him through the zoo and all the apes just stop and look. That's a really good moment. I like the moment when Koba writes David Oyelowo's name, and just little moments in there like that. There's also one in here that I think is fantastic, and that is a moment we've been building to for a while, and it's played up so low-key when we get there, and that is John Lithgow's death scene, where he's been a major character throughout the movie, and he's a huge thing in Caesar's life and Caesar's growing up. And he's kind of that constant through the story where it's like he kind of motivates what Franco's doing. Like his Alzheimer's is the whole reason Franco was doing this to begin with. And then we go forward and everything's great, and then he's a normal character, but then he starts to go back and regress, and then eventually we reach that moment. And you would think with a character this major, it'd be this really big moment, it'd be this really big emotional moment where Franco really puts on the acting, and it's this really big dramatic moment. There'd be dialogue, but no, it's just this really, really quiet moment when Lithgow is in bed, asleep. Franco sits down with him, holds his hand, goes to sleep, wakes up, and he's gone. No dialogue, no big emotion, no big score moment or anything. It's just a small, small, sad, melancholy moment, and that was great stuff. That was a really great way to do that scene. And there is obviously another character in this with Frida Pinto. It is kind of like, I'm not really positive what she's doing here. I don't know if it's to kind of give Caesar like kind of like Caesar had two parents, I guess, but you kind of already did that with Lithgow's character. But this whole thing about, like, he meets her, he immediately wins a date with her, and then we just flash forward, and they've been together for, like, 5 years, and she's really just, it's like they intentionally tried to focus as little on her as possible. So I'm not really sure what she was here to add too much, other than a bit of an emotional factor for Franco, I guess. But for the most part, I feel like that's something that maybe it's better that they blew past it, because it kind of added another factor to the story, like I said, we really didn't need. So it does kind of keep things moving a little better, and it does get us to a point. I actually heard some complaints about this when it first came out, but I think it works fine. This whole Golden Gate Bridge sequence, where we have like I said, we have all those little moments, we have these big moments, we have all the callbacks from the original, and all that. But then when we reach this Golden Gate Bridge sequence, it's kind of basically like an old-fashioned monster movie, or an old-fashioned disaster movie, when we get to this point. The kind of movie that Charlton Heston was famous for making. That was unlike Planet of the Apes, and I think that's fine. I actually think it kind of fits, especially since we're kind of going for a whole takeover vibe here. I mean, it was kind of inevitable we were going to reach this point, and I thought they handled it just fine. This Golden Gate Bridge sequence is fantastic. Even if it does kind of have a disaster movie feel, where it's kind of like we take these characters like David Oyelowo that have been throughout the movie, and it's just like, just how brutally can we kill them? And it's, I do really love that moment, that Oyelowo shits his pants moment, where it's like, Caesar might help him, Caesar might not help him, and then Caesar walks away and fucking Koba walks up. And I believe his exact line is, "No, not you." So I do think there's a lot of cool moments in there with that stuff. The nice little emotional moment they threw in when the gorilla gets shot after he brings the helicopter down, and it's an emotional moment and kind of a turning moment for Caesar. So all that stuff, I thought it worked pretty well. And then this eventually takes us right into our ending, where we set up the fall of humans during the closing credits. And I do like how nonchalantly they set that up, because the scene where Lithia is getting attacked by the neighbor and Caesar saves him, it's kind of like we hear the neighbor almost off-screen mention, "I'm a pilot, I can't be dealing with this, I gotta leave." And they plant that seed, but it's like, you don't really think for the rest of the movie that that guy being a pilot is going to have a whole lot to do with anything. And then sure enough, our ending comes, and it's like, that kind of has everything to do with everything. And it's just one small thing they threw in there real quick, just one small detail about this character that seems to only exist to just antagonize us, and to kind of, we like seeing Caesar bite his finger off and attack him because he's such a fuck. But then you realize how important it's going to be, this guy, and how this is basically the starting point for where we end up 10 years later when Dawn starts. So yeah, it's really the best thing we could have asked for with a Planet of the Apes reboot, I think. I'm sure things could have been done better. Like, it maybe could have been a little... Some of it probably could have been smaller in scale to kind of have the same effect that the original movie does. But it also does work when they take it really big, too. And the way they kind of find that balance a little bit with small moments like the Lithgow death scene, too, the big stuff like the Golden Gate Bridge, it's all surprisingly well put together. It sounds like it could be really messy on the surface. Maybe it's like the original movie, and it's like when they were going into it, they had doubts, and they were like, this could be a total disaster. But no, they actually really did pull it off, and most people believe that they topped it a lot with Dawn. So it'll be really interesting to see what War does. Which I will probably be, as you're watching this, I'm probably sitting in the theater with War, so we'll see. Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. I think it's pretty clear. I know it's pretty blatantly obvious to go with the original and this kind of thing, but I mean, really, it's one of those movies that's gonna stand the test of time, and I can't say this enough. It just gets better, and just really, really pulled off something that at the time, like I said, could have been a total disaster. Which you could say it did have that ground the original series started, and the good fortune of following Tim Burton's movie 10 years after the fact, but still, that was our last taste of it. So Rise really did pull off a lot, but I mean, really, there's just no movie that set off, you know, a moment in movie history like the original movie did, and that's... So yeah, I'm always going to kind of go with that, but this new franchise really is something, and really kind of totally exceeds the expectations you would think of rebooting Planet of the Apes in this 2010s era. So yes, all in all, fantastic job all around for everybody involved in this, but you know, the original always. So yes, as I was saying, the review for War should be the day after this. And then on Saturday I'll be seeing The Beguiled, so that'll be on the next video with Dunkirk, and along with plenty of other things. So the review video with War will also have like Chips and The Lost City of Zed and stuff like that, and a couple of smaller ones that really aren't worth talking about, but I'll do it anyway because they came out this year, and maybe they'll shed a light on some smaller movies that maybe other people will like better than I did. So so yes, I think that's going to do it for this. So yes, that's it.